morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to have a look at Orthworm EX. Yeah, that's right. It's getting an EX. It's been officially revealed, and this was one of them. It's a slightly awkward one to translate today, so I'm personally quite proud of myself for having done so. Obviously, I have checked with the lovely Antoine Boulet to make sure I've not done anything dumb, but I don't think I have. I think I nailed this translation, and I'm quite proud of myself. Stats here, starting off, stats are big. We've got 220 HP. Okay, to be fair, that's not too big. You know what is big? Retreat cost. The retreat cost here is very, very large. But it's large enough that it actually becomes a benefit. Because Heavy Baton, for instance, which lets you move energy from a KO'd Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon, it works here. This has a retreat cost of exactly 4. So if knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you get to move free basic energy, which, as we're going to see in a moment, is incredibly important. Moving that energy is going to be pretty gosh darn big. And I suppose I could mention Onyx here with Thumperlanche. Discard the top 5 cards of your deck. This attack does 80 damage for each Pokemon with a retreat cost of exactly 4 that you discarded in this way. Don't sleep on this, because late in the game, go and pop a bunch of Pokemon back into your deck. Use a couple Super Rod or something. Make your deck pretty much entirely, or maybe even actually entirely, retreat cost 4 Pokemon. And then this becomes kind of like a really good attacker. Like, if you hit 3 out of 5, that's 240 damage. If you hit 4 out of 5, that's 320, which will get the vast majority of Pokemon. Not saying it's the best plan ever, but I am saying that if you are playing around with retreat cost 4 Pokemon like Orthworm, there is genuinely an argument to be made here for playing a little bit of Onyx and seeing how it goes. Just putting that out there. But what does it actually do? Well, it's got a very, very, very nice ability indeed. I didn't translate the names of the abilities. I apologize for that. According to Antoine, it's Pummel Back. If this Pokemon is active and is damaged by an opponent's attack, put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon for each metal energy attached to this Pokemon. So kind of like Rocky Helmet, but supercharged. And I am absolutely fine with this. There is a world in which you attach a bunch of energy here. You know, basically each energy turns into a Rocky Helmet. And then you could, if you wanted, go Rocky Helmet as well. Although, honestly, I don't like Rocky Helmet with this. There's too many other tools I like instead. But it's basically that for every metal energy attached to it. And then off you go. Could this be any good? Yeah, kind of could. Because if your opponent attacks into you, if you've got, say, 4 energy on there, that's 80 damage. 5 is 100 and so on. Bearing in mind, I've already mentioned Heavy Baton here. So if your opponent KOs you with a Heavy Baton attached, you get to save a bunch of the energy that was on there, and then your next Orthworm has already got free energy ready to go. Now, we have seen this exact thing coming on here with Iron Hands, and that is, you can rely on it all you want, that being Heavy Baton, but there'll be times your opponent removes Heavy Baton, uses a Lost Vacuum or something along those lines, and then KOs you, and not only have you lost your Pokemon and given up prizes, but you are kind of relying on Heavy Baton, and Heavy Baton isn't working anymore, and now you've lost all of the energy in a deck where you were really relying on keeping some of the energy, and actually at that point, yeah, it does become pretty gosh darned annoying. But I'm just saying this could work. And this is another one of those Pokemon where I do think we need to have a proper chat about Ace-Specs. Because I do think this has got to be one of those, oh, no, you definitely can't KO it kind of Ace-Specs. Now, you could go Hero's Cape here. Gives you an extra 100 HP, puts you up to 320. That's quite nice. I am actually a big fan here of Survival Brace. That's the one that I want to go for personally. I really like Survival Brace here. It stops a one-hit KO from full health. Now, of course, your opponent can always put a couple of damage counters on and then KO you, but not every deck is actually able to do that. And the theory here essentially is your opponent has to attack into you. They take the damage back from your ability. You don't get KO'd. And then they've essentially got to attack twice into the same Orthworm in order to actually KO it, taking double the damage from the ability. And of course, it's really nice that Survival Brace gets discarded when it's used, because then that opens you up to put a heavy baton on there, which you definitely want, so that you can preserve energy such that your attacks get a lot cheaper, or at least easier to pay. That's still the same cost. You just start with free energy on, and your ability works nicely. In terms of the attack is fine. 4 energy, 150, and the text says the defending Pokemon cannot retreat during your opponent's next turn, which does actually combo quite nicely with the ability here, because essentially your opponent may wish to be retreating around and going, well, I don't want to attack with this because this doesn't have enough damage remaining. I'm going to go and attack with something else instead. And here the theory is that you basically force your opponent to attack with something they'd rather not attack with because you're stopping them retreating. You hit them for 150. You've got, 6 energy on. They're going to go up to 270. They can't take that. They want to retreat and attack with something else, but they can't. So they've essentially got to attack into you and get KO'd. Oh, yeah, and at the same time, something like Survival Brace is going to keep you here. This is the general theory. This is how the attack and the ability work so well together. You attack into 150. You've got enough energy on that they will get KO'd if they attack back. But now they're not able to retreat, so maybe they've got some kind of switching option, in which case they're fine. But if they don't, well, then now all of a sudden they're in a lot of trouble. I kind of like this. And of course, and I don't advocate for this card very much, but I actually really like this with Roseanne's backup. Lets you get a Pokemon, a tool, a stadium, and an energy from your discard pile into your deck. And yes, it will work with Survival Brace. We have seen a couple of ace specs which specifically say they cannot be recovered from the discard pile. This one doesn't, and I think just this once we can get a little bit excited about Roseanne's backup. So essentially the theory here is, and look, this is awkward and it's not always going to work, but the theory here is every one of your Orthworm has Survival Brace on. It takes a bunch of damage but doesn't get KO'd. At which point, you whack a heavy baton on there, you get ready for the next one, while you recover your Survival Brace, so that the next one can have a Survival Brace, and off you go. Is it going to work? Sometimes it will, and this is my argument for the card. I really like this card. Obviously, we haven't mentioned it yet. It's fairly obvious, but let's mention it now. Obviously, gigantic fan of Metang here. And then this is standard, right? We're talking about a metal Pokemon. You need a bunch of metal energy. Obviously, Metang is your boy here. Let's look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and any metal energy you find, you attach to your Pokemon in any way that you like. You know, this is a standard thing, right? We all play Metang. And the theory here is Metang gets you rolling, and Heavy Baton keeps you rolling, but Metang also gives you that boost as you go through the game, and that could be fun. I like this. I do think you have to be playing around with Survival Brace and Metang, and it seems like a Pokemon you probably have to build around. But if you can chain a couple of Survival Brace, while also taking advantage of Heavy Baton, and I think the tools are going to be important, using Metang in the early game, you're not doing enough damage with Orthworm here, but I don't think that matters, as long as you're getting some benefit from the ability as well. I should also mention, it is just 4 colorless energy, 150. So any deck that can accelerate energy, I'm talking about Baxcalibur decks accelerating water energy, I'm talking about Lugia Archeops decks accelerating special energy, because it's colorless energy it uses, this is a basic Pokemon that hits a decent amount of metal damage. So if you need to be hitting a Pokemon for metal weakness, this will actually work quite nicely. 300 damage if you're hitting for weakness. It's a basic Pokemon, it uses colorless energy, and both the decks I mentioned, Baxcalibur and Archeops decks, they're really not going to worry about the 4 energy. That's going to be perfectly doable. So if you're looking for a Pokemon that hits decent damage that's metal, that uses colorless energy, this will work quite nicely here as well. And there's something I need to add before we finish here, because I've been double checking. This doesn't actually say if this Pokemon is active. This works on the bench. Now, most of the time, let's be honest here, most of the time your opponent is not going to choose this as the Pokemon to hit on the bench. But then again, remember how I mentioned Survival Brace? And how Survival Brace only works if you're at full HP? Well, if your opponent tries to damage you early to get around Survival Brace and does it with damage rather than damage counters, they will have to take 20 damage for each mental energy attached to you, and that's actually kind of hilarious. There are also weird things you can do here. So something like Radiant Greninja does 90 to 2 Pokemon. So what you could do here is just have one of these in the active and one of these on the bench, both with a whole bunch of energy on, and then your opponent would be forced to attack both of them and take all the recoil damage from both of them at the same time. I know in this scenario you've got no Metang or anything else, so it's kind of awkward. Let's just ignore that for the time being, alright? You could kind of force them to attack both the Orthworm and take both the recoil. And I know that I've mentioned it 15 times on this channel and nobody else likes it, but I still like that Ting-Lu that does 20 to all of your opponent's Pokemon. And if anyone actually ends up using that in the future, that single Ting-Lu would take recoil damage from every energy attached to every one of your Orthworm, which could add up very nicely indeed. Although for what it's worth, there is no Pokemon around at the moment. I had this conversation with the lovely Antoine Boulet, trying to figure out if there is a good Pokemon around at the moment that hits all of the bench. Antoine came around with Spinder from Silver Tempest, and they might be right, that might be the best one. And I think that says an awful lot. I still like Ting-Lu. One day I'm going to make a good deck with Ting-Lu and it's going to be lovely. But I just need to make it super clear before I end the video. There is nothing in the ability that says it has to be active, so it does not have to be active, and there will be times that could become very relevant. I'm going to give this a tentative 4 Wassies. Maybe this is just too much like my kind of deck. Maybe it's the fact that it's splashable into things like Lugia and Baxcalibur decks, which make me happier. Or maybe it is awesome. Either way, I want to hear from you guys, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at Lawasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, join a Discord, and all kinds of fun things. And of course, get shout-outs on the channel, like the lovely Stegaraptor, who's been a supporter of ours for a while now and is a very lovely person and has helped out with a bunch of stuff in the past, so I can confirm is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross and you've been watching PTCG Radio.